Diana Lee Avera was born on April 15, 1960. Unfortunately, she was diagnosed with multiple mental health issues, including paranoid schizophrenia, but she never let that stop her. She eventually married Willie Avera, and they had 2 sons together. She was described as a very loving mother who adored her 2 sons. Unfortunately, by 1982, Willie and Diana had divorced. While Willie wasn't thought to have been abusive to Diana, he was basically an alcoholic and had allegedly been abusive to the children. Diana's schizophrenia would get so bad at times that the court would commit her to Searcy Hospital, which was basically a house of horrors. She had multiple stays there from 1976 to 1982. During one of her episodes, she thought there were spies inside her baby's mattress, leading to her cutting the mattress up to get the spies out. When she wasn't experiencing an episode, she was described as a very sweet and compassionate individual. On May 21, 1982, 22-year-old Diana was arrested in Foley, Alabama for disorderly conduct and spent 7 days in jail. She was then involuntarily committed back to the now-closed Searcy Hospital in Mount Vernon, Alabama. While she never wanted to be committed to the facility, she really didn't want to go this time, most likely because she was enduring outdated medical practices such as electroconvulsive treatments, which led to her being described as a zombie who could barely walk or talk. The details behind her arrest are unknown, and there are no police records from then. Her family believes she was most likely arrested because she was having one of her episodes. Before going missing in early 1982, a nurse named Lorraine Lacey, who worked at a nursing home but was also affiliated with Searcy Hospital, sent Diana's mother a letter expressing her desire to help her. She wanted Diana to stay with her and help her with housework and her 14-year-old son. In return, she offered to train Diana as a nurse and provided her with room and board. She said she would treat her as her own daughter and make sure she doesn't get into any trouble. Diana's family found the letter strange and wondered if maybe Lorraine was aware of the horrible treatment Diana was going through and maybe wanted to get her out of there and help her. Lorraine also has a daughter who is the same age as Diana and is now in her 60s. Becky had tried to get in touch with her, but she refused to help with the case or provide any information on why her mother would have offered that back then. Interestingly, while at the hospital, she met another patient, 26-year-old David Weir from Jacksonville, Florida, and they had allegedly fallen in love. Just like Diana, he was also diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. He even sent her mother a letter asking for her hand in marriage. David's mother, Juliet, also wrote Diana's mother a letter expressing her happiness for Diana and David and said she was looking forward to meeting them both. However, their relationship didn't last. While she wasn't allegedly dating anyone else, she remained in contact with Willie, who would come to visit her and even take her out of the hospital when he was allowed to do so. According to Amanda, patients would sometimes be allowed to leave the premises for up to a week. However, just 3 months after being committed, in August of 1982, she allegedly escaped from the hospital and was never seen again. However, when the hospital called her dad to inform him of her disappearance, they told him that she had eloped, which was a word they would use for all their patients that had escaped or disappeared. They then asked her parents to join in on the search and said they had reported her missing. While there was an investigator assigned to her case, very little was done, and the missing persons report was never officially filed. This would go undiscovered until 2020, nearly 40 years later. When her family found out, her niece, Amanda Hill, officially reported her missing in August 2020. After she went missing, David created a website that can no longer be found and also wrote a letter to Diana's sister, Becky, saying he could no longer marry Diana because she was out of control. He claimed he gave her a ring from his grandmother and believed she sold it. He also said he hoped she at least got $500 for it. This was strange to Becky because her sister was already missing at this point. This letter also made some start to suspect that he could be involved in her disappearance. Her niece, Amanda, has been a big part of why the case has regained attention. In 2024, she was able to have Diana's DNA compared against the olive branch Jane Doe, but unfortunately, it wasn't a match. Her family also tracked down Mrs. Lorraine, who wanted to help Diana, but she unfortunately has been diagnosed with dementia and does not remember her. On August 2, 2024, there was once again renewed hope when a skull was discovered in Mount Vernon, Alabama. If the skull doesn't belong to her, what really happened? Did she escape the facility and start a new life? Did Willie or David have something to do with her disappearance? Or did she die in the hospital and it was covered up? The hospital was known for its mistreatment of patients. At the time, Diana was 5 foot 3 inches tall and weighed approximately 120 pounds, with blonde hair and hazel eyes. Unfortunately, as of August 2024, her family is still waiting on the results from the skull, and this case remains unsolved. Jennifer Lynn Fay was born on Christmas Day in 1972 to Donnie McLean and went by Jen. In the fall of 1989, Jen was living with her mother and siblings in an apartment in Brockton, Massachusetts, and was described as a very happy and social individual. She loved hanging out with friends and listening to rock music. Unfortunately, she also trusted just about everyone, which would ultimately lead to her disappearance. On November 14, 1989, Jen's mother left her to babysit her 12-year-old sister Yvette and her 4-year-old brother James. However, after her mother left, she called her 17-year-old cousin Tammy Young and asked her to come over to watch her siblings while she went out to a neighborhood party, and Tammy agreed. Jen first went by a female friend's home just a block away on Broad Place, but she wasn't home. Her mother had answered the door and said Jen smelled of liquor and appeared slightly intoxicated. She then left with 21-year-old Mark Wambolt. The following morning, when she failed to return home, her family reported her missing. Unfortunately, since Jen had run away in the past, investigators didn't initially treat her case as anything more than that. It wasn't helped that Mark had a criminal record and was reluctant to talk to the police. If he had told them the events of the night, they might have realized sooner that she didn't simply run away. However, her mother knew better, especially since her past runaways always involved her returning soon after. She had even written her mother a note 2 months before she disappeared, apologizing for returning home late one night. So it definitely seems like she wouldn't up and vanish on her own without notifying someone. 4 years after her disappearance in 1993, 22-year-old Rena Conrad, who was mentally disabled, was rescued from the home of 39-year-old Diana Miller, who had held her captive in her cellar for over a year. She was charged along with 20-year-old Richard Verville, who also lived in the home with Diana and her husband Bruce. This occurred in Halifax, Massachusetts. However, they only lived there since 1992, and before that, they lived in Brockton, and while there, Rena was forced to live in a closet. Also in Brockton was the case of Diane Fabiano, who had locked her sons, ages 4, 6, and 7, in dog cages in the basement. The grandmother of the children, Virginia Steele, described the kids as sexually precocious and dangerously violent. When this was discovered in 1994, the children were removed from her custody. She had also kept them locked in cages while living in Brockton, about a block from where Jen disappeared before she moved to Halifax. It sounds like Brockton had a very dark side in the late 80s and early 90s. In 2003, investigators received a tip that Jen had been murdered, placed in the cab of a truck, and dumped in a pond not far from her home. Authorities searched the pond, but nothing was found. In 2008, they were able to track Mark Wambolt down in Vermont, and he finally told more of the story. He said that on the night of the party, he and Jen left to go to Rice's Market to buy more alcohol. This location was less than a minute's walk from her home. Before heading back to the party, they both went in the direction of her home so she could pick up a jacket. However, while on their way back to the party, Mark stopped on Broad Street so he could throw up. When he was done, he noticed that Jen had walked away from him and was now talking to 2 men in a brown pickup truck. He then claims he saw her go inside the store and decided to walk home because he wasn't feeling well. He left before she came back outside and believes she most likely got into the vehicle with the men she was allegedly seen talking to. Mark lived in West Am, and the walk would have been around 1.3 miles. Investigators then received a tip that led them to an overgrown lot off Manley Street in West Bridgewater. When dogs were brought out, they went into full alert, which made investigators believe there was a dead body there. They began digging and sifting through the dirt, but once again, nothing was found. One suspect that investigators have looked into is Kevin Wayne Mailer, also known as Boston. In 1989, he was 22 years old and friends with Mark, the last person to have seen Jen. Mailer even bragged to people about burying her body after she disappeared. In September of 2022, he was charged with the 2019 kidnapping and murder of Kevin Kyle Craig. When he was charged with the crime, he was already in prison, serving a 5-year sentence for drug charges. He murdered him to cover up their involvement in the disappearance of Pamela Faith Roach. As of today, she has not been found. As for Jen, her mother Dottie believes she was either kidnapped or recruited into a cult and would someday be found alive. As for investigators, they are now 80% sure they know the motive and the person behind her disappearance. However, as of August 2024, no one has been arrested, and this case remains unsolved. Jordan Simeon was born on January 31, 1997, and grew up in Bismarck, North Dakota. He was described as a very caring and compassionate individual who enjoyed music, arts, and video games. When he was 16 years old, he sadly lost his mother to Huntington's disease, a genetic disorder that causes progressive degeneration of nerve cells in the brain. In 2020, 25-year-old Jordan was living in Fargo, North Dakota, and had unfortunately lost his job and was experiencing symptoms from early-onset Huntington's disease. All this led to him experiencing serious struggles in his life. His friend, Adonia Daigle, was living in New Orleans, Louisiana, after moving from North Dakota in 2020 and working in the healthcare industry. In an effort to help him with the disease, she began trying to set him up with some local doctors. Because of that, and Jordan's want to start fresh, he made plans to relocate there. On March 5, 2022, Jordan set out on the 1,000-mile drive from Fargo to New Orleans with all his stuff in his green 2014 Kia Soul. The next day, when his family spoke to him, he was on Interstate 40 in Arkansas. Unfortunately, when he got close to North Little Rock, near the White Oak crossing exit, his car broke down. He called for roadside assistance and called Adonia around 4:30 p.m. He explained the situation, and she booked him a room at the local Super 8 motel. She also booked him a bus ticket and sent him $250 through Venmo. While on FaceTime with him, he said the tow truck had arrived and they were going to give him a ride to the motel. However, he never checked in and was never heard from again. Even stranger was the fact that his car was never towed. The following day, when Adonia didn't hear back from him, she reported him missing. They were hopeful he might show up on the bus that was set to arrive in New Orleans on March 8th at 12:35 p.m., but he sadly didn't. Authorities were able to locate his car where he had broken down, and there was nothing wrong except that the catalytic converter had been cut off. All his belongings, including his Xbox, laptop, and a wooden box that belonged to his late mother, were still there. The keys were also found sitting on top of the car. The area was searched multiple times, but no signs of Jordan were found. They checked his cell phone records, but it appeared to have been turned off the day he went missing. Authorities were at a loss until April 27, 2022, when they searched once more and found his body in Newton Creek, about 200 yards off the interstate. Unfortunately, they were unable to determine his cause of death because no trauma to his body was found. So, what happened to Jordan? Did he have an episode from the Huntington's disease, or did something more sinister occur? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Sadly, as of August 2024, this case remains unsolved. Juan Geronimo Ward was born on November 20th, 1968, to parents Elizabeth and Thomas, and grew up in Saluda, Virginia, with his 5 siblings. In 2022, 56-year-old Juan was now living near Washington, D.C. in Springfield, Virginia, and was the father of 2 daughters. He was described as a good dad and a very good-hearted individual who loved his family. He was also a big-time fan of the Miami Dolphins. He had worked the last 12 years as a federal government employee for the General Services Administration. He also stayed in contact with his family on a daily basis until he up and vanished one day. On May 26, 2022, Juan was supposed to attend a division-wide meeting at work, but he failed to show up. His employer was concerned because he never missed meetings, so they called and informed his family. They also tried to get in touch with him but were unsuccessful and reported him missing that same day. Investigators discovered that on the evening of May 24, 2022, 2 days before he was reported missing, Juan was seen leaving the Revolution Darts and Billiards after hanging out with a friend. He was then seen on surveillance video withdrawing money from an ATM and then another ATM the following afternoon, 15 miles away in Woodbridge. The second location was at a Navy Federal Credit Union, and after using the ATM at 12:47 p.m., he was never seen alive again. Over a month later, on July 6, his body and car were located on Albin Road in Springfield, a little over 6 miles from the bar. When investigators arrived, they found his body in the woods, not far from his 2008 Nissan Altima. Nighthawk Investigative Services got involved and was able to determine that his car was moved to the location where it was found sometime between June 27th and June 29th. So where was it before that? Plus, this is a very busy road, so why did it take so long for investigators to find him and the car? The woods where he was found is a known party area with lots of beer cans and trash. Those close to him don't believe he would have ever gone in those woods unless he was forced to or tricked by someone. Allegedly, 2 weeks before his death, he got into a huge fight with one of his daughters. The same daughter also dated Jordan Anderson, who murdered a man at Denny's after he picked up food for his DoorDash delivery job. His daughter dated Walker until he was sentenced to 87 years in prison for the murder. On August 29, 2022, the Help Find Juan G. Ward Facebook page posted that they were getting reports from their sources that his death was the result of foul play, but the police department has not released any details. There are a lot of theories on what happened to Juan, such as he was robbed at the ATM and murdered, that his family is involved, or that he was lured into the woods and murdered. However, as of August 2024, we still don't know the truth, and this case remains unsolved. Kristen Marie Galvan was born on April 23, 2004. In 2019, 15-year-old Kristen was living in Spring, Texas, and was a member of the JROTC. She was also on the drill team and was described as a good student and sweet individual. Unfortunately, she would get herself mixed up with a horrible individual that she met online, and it ultimately led to her disappearance. That year, Kristen's mother, Robin, said her daughter's attitude began to change. She was now skipping school, her grades were dropping, and she was doing drugs. She then got mixed up with Arion Jackson, who was a 21-year-old rapper from Houston who went by the stage name Young Corleone. However, he also had a dark side and was paying high school students to recruit females by offering them bags, shoes, clothes, and a life full of riches and fame. Upon meeting Kristen, he lured her out of her home and into a house on Bisonet Street that is known for prostitution. It turns out that Jackson was a pimp and had forced Kristen into sex trafficking, where she had to sleep with as many as 15 men a day. After being reported missing, law enforcement was able to find and rescue her. She was returned to her parents, but unfortunately suffered severe trauma from the abuse she endured. Thankfully, over the next week, she began to return to her normal self, and on New Year's Day, 2020, she went to visit her grandmother who lived in the Woodlands, about 9 miles north of Spring, Texas. That same day, her family gave her cell phone back to her, and that would, unfortunately, be the worst mistake of their life. The very next day, on January 2nd, 2020, Kristen disappeared again. After being reported missing for a second time, witnesses came forward and reported seeing photos of her on a website known for advertising sexual services. It looked to investigators like she had been forced right back into sex trafficking. Her mother, Robin, was also receiving messages from people claiming to be Kristen and threats from people who wanted her to stop searching for her daughter. One of the people who claimed to be Kristen said she had a baby and it was in a porta potty. In March 2021, the DA showed Robin a photo and she confirmed it was her daughter. They wouldn't give her the website where they got the photo, so she did her own research and found the escort site. She then traveled to Atlanta and found some of the other girls from the site, but sadly, Kristen was nowhere to be found. One good thing to come out of this is that Robin has thankfully been able to rescue a few missing women while searching for her daughter. Also, Jackson is now behind bars after he and his mother were both charged with sex trafficking. On December 19, 2022, he pleaded guilty in 2 different cases to sex trafficking of a minor and conspiracy to traffic an adult female by force, fraud, or coercion. Between August 2019 and July 2020, he forced both minors and adult females into commercial sex, threatening them with violence, and even tattooed them with his brand, which consisted of a 5-point crown and a bag of money. While in Harris County Jail in Houston, it was discovered that someone smuggled in drugs and cell phones to Jackson so he could continue running his business. In the end, on February 14, 2023, he was sentenced to 27 years in federal prison, and once released, he will be required to serve 15 years of supervised parole and register as a sex offender. While justice was served, it still did not bring Kristen home, and Jackson claims to have no clue where she is. Kristen has blonde hair and hazel eyes, stands 5 foot 6 inches tall, and weighs 135 pounds. She has a heart tattoo on her ankle, and if still alive, she would be 20 years old, but as of August 2024, she has not been found, and this case remains unsolved.